Hello and welcome to Week 1, Unit 1 of the OpenSAP course, Touch IoT with SAP Leonardo. My name's Bob Caswell and I'm a Senior Product Manager on the Smart Connected Business team here at SAP. My team and I are really excited to kick off this course and bring you the latest and greatest on the topic of the Internet of Things. So let's get started and let's talk about the Internet of Things, or IoT for short. IoT is not only a fairly new and broad topic, but also a highly iterative and rapidly evolving topic. Some of you may remember our OpenSAP course from last year called Imagine IoT, and I think it's worth taking the time to explain briefly the reason we're hosting this new IoT course only months after the previous one. You may have already guessed it, the reason for another course this soon on the topic of IoT is because of just how much has happened recently, both in the industry and at SAP specifically. So just to illustrate this more concretely, while this course does have some overlap with the previous course, almost all the units are brand new, with more than half of the underlying content and concepts covered also being new. So we've got a lot to cover, but plan to help you understand IoT in a pragmatic and fun way. And this brings me to the name of this course, Touch IoT with SAP Leonardo. While we're still going to imagine what's possible with IoT like we did in the previous course, one of the differences is that Touch IoT with SAP Leonardo will also go much further, specifically in two ways. First, we want each of you to touch IoT more directly, and we've provided some optional exercises throughout the course which are going to enable you to play around with brand new IoT solutions from SAP. And second, SAP just recently announced SAP Leonardo, an innovation portfolio focused on digital transformation, with IoT being a central part of that. So, in week 1 of this course, we're going to go over some of the new technology changes in the industry overall, and then we're going to dive into SAP Leonardo and the latest on SAP's IoT strategy in week 2. And the goal there is giving you a hands-on understanding of how and why SAP is placing big bets on IoT. And then in week 3, we'll empower you to create your own IoT prototype based on everything you're going to learn in week 1 and week 2. And while some of you may remember that we did an IoT prototype challenge in the last course, this time it'll have a bit of a different focus with new templates and tools to allow you to prototype even more flexibly than before. So, past course participants and newcomers alike are strongly encouraged to participate. Which brings me to a larger point. This course has been designed both for those of you who took the previous course and for those of you who are joining without any IoT experience at all. It's okay if you haven't heard much about IoT, as we're going to start at the beginning and quickly help you become very familiar with what you need to know. And for those of you with some IoT experience, you're going to be seeing and learning all sorts of new stuff along the way. Just to highlight one more example of this, we're really excited to be joined by IoT experts from industry analysts IDC and Technology Business Research, who are each going to present and share their unique perspective on the latest changes coming from the Internet of Things. Okay, so now before we jump into the definition of IoT in the first place, let's take a quick look at the course structure, deadlines, and requirements. As mentioned, you're first going to get to know IoT, then go deeper into IoT with SAP, and finally you'll get your hands dirty with some IoT prototyping. And as part of that prototyping, you'll get to participate in a competition, which is going to include a peer review process where you're going to give and get feedback on your prototype and your peers' prototypes. And then what's really interesting is the top 200 are going to be showcased in a gallery at the end of the course. Also, if you're in the top 200, you'll get to choose how SAP funds entrepreneurs in the developing world through the nonprofit organization Kiva. And while in this course we want to show you how connecting things can create tremendous value throughout the world, ultimately we don't want to lose sight of how connecting people can help bring about positive change as well. And so doing a bit of both types of connecting is the best way we found to make that happen. But one more thing, thanks to our partner Intel, we'll also be giving away some pretty cool IoT hardware to the top 5 winners of the prototype challenge. So we're going to get more into those challenge details later in a later unit, but now I really want us to look at a timeline view that shows you which parts of the course to expect over the next several weeks, just to kind of set expectations and give you kind of a baseline. It's considered a 3-week course because the first 3 weeks are when you're going to get all the learning content, but we're also going to give you some extra time for the process of creating your own prototype and evaluating your peers like we discussed. And I guess I should mention that unlike most OpenSAP courses, this course has no final exam. So the points required to complete the course come from the 3 weekly assignments during the first 3 weeks and from submitting your prototype. But don't worry too much about those details at this point. We're going to get into those specifics in later units. Just remember that like every OpenSAP course, you need at least half of the maximum points available to pass the course and receive your record of achievement. So that means that you should expect to commit about 3 or 4 hours per week if you would like to participate fully in the course. Also, I just want to make it clear one more time that anyone is welcome to join. There are no prerequisites. Okay, with that, let's get started with IoT. So what is the Internet of Things and why should you care? Well, let's start by taking a look at some popular definitions out there. So Gartner calls IoT the network of physical objects that contain embedded technology to communicate and sense or interact with their internal states or the external environment. But then if you look at Wikipedia, Wikipedia has a definition and calls out other aspects like the software involved and the fact that these physical devices are collecting and exchanging data. And last but not least here, there's another definition from Digital Trends that focuses on the fact that these connected things are really coming together to understand what we as humans are doing in our daily lives in order to make our lives easier. So that's really quite the variety of definitions. So we really like this idea of creating your own IoT definition and thought we'd give it a try as well. Well, not really. The truth is all those previous definitions are correct and they each complement each other nicely. So if you combine them together, what you'll understand is that the Internet of Things is the network of physical objects that contains, these objects contain embedded technology to sense and interact with their environment and each other to collect and exchange data to make our lives better. That's our attempt of making one definition. So there's connectivity, there's sensing, there's action that happens, there's data storage, there's data analysis, and there's sharing. All these actions come together to make an environment where our lives are improved in some way. So let's look at IoT in the broader context of technology history. The first industrial revolution, a couple hundred years ago, it facilitated production using water and steam power. And then the second industrial revolution then introduced mass production with the help of electric power, which was then followed by the third industrial revolution, which is sometimes referred to as the digital revolution, in which electronics and IT further automated production processes. And so now we're just getting started with what you might call the fourth version of industry, in which digital and physical systems and things are combined for even more productivity. The key difference or improvements this time is that this higher level of productivity is based on data, insights, and knowledge that are really only obtainable when everything is connected. One other interesting point being discussed right now is that this fourth version of industry may turn out to be the most sustainable because persistent connectivity allows for much more precision along the value chain of product creation to product consumption. So while industrial revolutions have historically been somewhat criticized for the byproduct that is the massive waste, part of what's really fascinating about this fourth industrial revolution is that it's being discussed and designed in a way such that it can become much more self-sustainable with comparatively very little waste. This self-sustainability concept alone could have hugely positive consequences for society. So we've had the internet now for a while, well, depending on how you count it, at least for a few decades. But what's the difference between the internet and the Internet of Things? Well, the normal, quote unquote normal or traditional internet is more the Internet of People. In fact, let's call it that to help make this point. The Internet of People, because it has been mostly the product of people, so all the data, images, recordings, books, games, commerce, and a lot of other stuff available, was created by people, for people, and is about people. And this Internet of People is one of the most important and transformative technologies ever invented. And at this point, I think you'd agree that the internet is like a digital fabric that's woven into our lives in one way or another. But just as this Internet of People has changed the world, so now will the next phase of the Internet, or the Internet of Things. So this new Internet of Things, it's clearly not just about connecting people, it's about connecting things, hence its name. So why the big deal? Well, once things can start sharing their experiences with other things, new insights and innovations become possible. But how does that work exactly? Well, it works like this. You take things, then you add the ability to sense and communicate and touch and control, and then those things become smart things with the ability to interact and collaborate with each other. So think of it like this. We as humans, as human beings, we interact, contribute, and collaborate with each other and with other people in our own environment through our five senses: seeing, smelling, touching, tasting, and hearing. Well, imagine things with some of those same senses and then add the ability to communicate, and that's where the Internet of People and the Internet of Things intersect. So long story short, the Internet of Things is where the physical world seamlessly interacts with the digital world. So let's look at a few facts about IoT. Let's first give some credit where credit is due. The term IoT was coined by Kevin Ashton from MIT way back in 1999. That said, nearly 9 out of 10 people still haven't heard about it, even if, technically speaking, ATMs, those machines where you can withdraw cash from your bank, those are considered some of the first IoT objects, and they went online as far back as 1974. Also, even though we have billions of connected things today, in the next 4 years, the number of things is expected to increase nearly tenfold. One example, in 2012, only 10% of cars were connected to the internet, but by 2020, 90% of cars will be connected. And last but not least, experts mostly agree that in order for something to be part of the Internet of Things, it needs to have sensors, internet connectivity, some kind of processing power, some decent quality, and it should be efficient, reliable, secure, and cost-effective. So why now? Why is IoT all the buzz? Well, it comes down to a few things, 3 things: availability, affordability, and scalability. So let's tackle each one of these one by one. So IoT devices are already common, cheap, and easily replaceable. Basic infrastructure to support IoT, things like Wi-Fi or internet cafes, are already commonplace, with near ubiquitous basic mobile connectivity in the world. And growing levels of faster speeds all over the place are popping up. So by 2018, half of the world will be connected to the internet. So what about affordability? Well, IoT research and development costs continue to be absorbed by strong demand. So the average cost of sensors used in IoT products is dropping, and it's soon going to be only about 30 cents. And so now for scalability. IoT devices are, by design, meant to be scalable. Many devices already offer simple plug-and-play functionality and do not require skilled technicians for installation or maintenance. And reduced and alternate power supplies, such as solar, can maintain sensors and networks where there isn't consistent electricity. Okay, so finally, IoT devices also tend to be highly flexible and expandable. So in case that wasn't convincing enough, here's some nice visualizations to show you how the average cost of sensors is dropping dramatically over time. And also, at the same time, check out how the percentage of the global population using the internet is ever rising. So what happens is those two trends combined explain why the Internet of Things is really taking off. Also, one thing I want to mention, while most of this course will be focusing on technologies more readily available, you should be aware that we're on the cusp of a new level of something called technology convergence. What this means is unexpected innovations are often realized when multiple groundbreaking technologies are rapidly growing and evolving at the same time. So let me put it another way. The Internet of Things isn't happening in a bubble by itself, and it'll likely be most impactful when combined with advancements in areas like artificial intelligence, natural language generation, robotics and drones, and virtual and augmented reality. This is just to name a few other areas where rapid innovation is happening right now. So you'll definitely want to keep that in mind as you progress through this course. And in fact, that's why in future units, we'll be highlighting several of those sister technologies along with showing you more about SAP Leonardo, which is SAP's approach to digital transformation by way of all this technology convergence. Okay, but let's get back to IoT. Now that you have a basic understanding of what it is and why it's happening, let's take a look at some IoT examples available today. So let's start with some industrial scenarios. There's so many ways that IoT is literally already improving the lives of workers in the oil and gas industry. When sensors are attached to pipelines that can track in real time things like pressure, temperature, and transfer speeds, what this can mean is any sort of problem, a pipe bursting, for example, that can be detected before disastrous consequences can happen. And speaking of disaster, it's really not the most enjoyable topic of conversation, but natural disasters do happen, and it's something humanity has to deal with every year. The good news being that the Internet of Things is here to help in those moments of crisis. So in one example, you can see here, remote controls alert vending machines to tell them to dispense drinks and snacks freely during disasters. And the electronic displays on these vending machines, they can be repurposed and they can provide public announcements with helpful details on where to seek help close by. I really like this example because it's really IoT at its best. Now let's take a look at the smart pill bottle. The bottle cap fits onto prescription bottles and monitors whether or not users are taking their medication as their doctors prescribed. The cap doesn't connect to the internet itself, but it transmits data to an internet-connected hub that plugs into the wall. So if a user misses a dose, the cap will light up after a few minutes. And if the bottle remains closed an hour after that, the cap lights up and chimes. And if it's 2 hours past the dosage time, users will then receive a text message or a phone call. And there are even more connectivity features. Right now, these caps are available for around $10 to $15 per month, but as we discussed before, the cost is continually dropping. Now, another example, somewhat related and in development now, is a special type of contact lens with embedded transparent biosensors. So while a smart pill bottle is pretty cool, it's still fairly reactive when compared to this type of biosensor that can enable you to basically monitor your own blood glucose levels as well as a bunch of other bodily functions. And this becomes a proactive way to detect disease extremely early without invasive tests. So these biosensors are being developed to include connectivity so as to transmit this vital health information to your smartphone. It's pretty cool. Okay, so now that we're looking more at what's in development, let's go through one more example, but this time with a little bit of a twist. Let's imagine what a normal day might look like in a world where everything is truly connected. So, I get up in the morning, I might have a bracelet that senses my sleep cycles, and it may even know the most opportune moment to gracefully wake me up by gently, vibrating and blinking a light. So when that happens, my bracelet sends a message to other things in my home. And pretty soon, a chain of events starts to occur. My bedside lamp might turn on, my thermostat adjusts the temperature of the room, and my coffee machine starts up. So when I make breakfast and I take out the last egg out of the fridge is aware and it adds eggs to my next drone delivery for later that day. Also, I get a notification that a driverless car is on its way and it's going to be picking me up in 10 minutes or so that I'm on time for my first meeting in the office. And then when I leave the house, the thermostat adjusts the temperature downward as it knows that no one is in the house anymore. So you get the idea. All these things that already improve my life, well, they start improving my life even more when they're connected and automated. And this is all happening while maximizing efficiency and minimizing waste. So what this does is it eliminates the need for me to keep track of reoccurring activities. I can instead focus on more important things because of these other things becoming smarter. So as another example, my lawn sprinklers, they might automatically delay themselves because they sense that kids are playing football on the lawn. Or the kids' grandparents stop by to visit and can automatically be let into the house because the house knows who they are. Now remember, lots of pieces of this scenario already exist today, but in a few years there may be even better examples of what IoT really can do for us, once we all learn how to really take advantage of it, especially within the context of the other innovations we discussed earlier. Okay, so one last thing I'd like to mention before we wrap up. From a business perspective, when everything is connected, all of a sudden, we're going to need to reevaluate who has access to which parts of an experience, both the physical and the digital side. So using a smart fridge as an example, if the fridge can now measure which items it has in it and which it does not, it can share this data in a safe way with authorized parties. And this could create new business models for services that can provide you with automated grocery delivery based on you allowing your connected things to talk to their connected things, the connected things of those services. So what's becoming clear here is that all this connectivity can enable a much tighter relationship between businesses and their customers, of course, if the customers are interested. And if you understand what a customer might expect or want, given the opportunities provided by all this new technology, well, then business models may start to change from being more product-centric to becoming more service-centric. So, for example, the grocery purchase of yesterday could evolve into the restocking service of tomorrow. Okay, so let's review what we learned today. The Internet of Things, it's here to make our lives better. And it's a network of physical objects that can sense and interact with each other while collecting and exchanging data. We also learned that how availability, scalability, and affordability, these three characteristics are making it so the Internet of People is becoming the Internet of not just people, but also the Internet of Things. And finally, we walked through some IoT examples available today, and we briefly discussed converging technologies plus the not too distant IoT possibilities of tomorrow. So next up, you're going to learn all about innovation, imagination, and what that can mean for making an internet of good things. Thanks for watching, and we really hope you enjoy the course.